Okay, I'm doing this from my phone now. Well, I prefer to do it from my desktop. And if Greg is showing up, I think I can invite somebody. Your viewers, no viewers to invite yet. Add viewers to be in your broadcast. Oh, let me invite.
Hey, what's up, Mike? We got this.
How are you? Okay, good.
Awesome. Excited to be here.
We're going to start.
We're going to kick this off, man. I'm excited to be a guest on your amazing content because I am a huge fan of your stuff and one of your good buddies. So it's always cool to join you and provide some value.
Well, I want to thank you for coming on. You are the first guest I have ever had on anything I've ever broadcasted. So I appreciate it.
Well, listen, I mean, I'm happy to be a guest on here, and I think we have a unique perspective because we do deals in New York. I don't even live in New York anymore, and it's a completely different market. And I've been talking about this for a while. I mean, I've been doing this for almost 5 years now, and a lot of people who reach out to me in New York, some of the advice that I give them scares them a little bit because I remember when I got started, I got some advice and I was very scared. So I wish you were around doing this stuff when I got started because I would have been camping out on your doorstep.
I appreciate you saying that. It means a lot coming from you. So for people who are watching and don't know who Greg Helbeck is, Greg is probably one of the best people I've ever heard on the phone talking to sellers. And to know how Greg got started is pretty amazing because Greg got started when he was around 20. He was in college in New York and he wanted to get into real estate. Do you hear that feedback or is that just me?
You sound good on my end. I don't hear
Okay,
any
good.
feedback
Good. I
from
hear
your
some
side.
feedback. So what Greg did is he started recording his phone calls to sellers and playing them back on Facebook, which
Yeah.
takes a lot of honesty and critiquing himself. And what it got him was the guy whose program he and I both went to, John Martinez, who really is the premier sales trainer for real estate investors, reached out to him and said, "Why don't you come work for me?" And Greg is now one of John's trainers who works on John's private clients. So Greg is an amazing guy. I never said this to you, Greg. I never told your story. But I have a guy that I talk to on the phone a lot. He's like an accountability partner. And I once mentioned you, and he goes, "Greg Helbeck, isn't that guy Superman?" I said, "What are you talking about?" He goes, "That guy looks like Superman. He does deals like Superman. That guy's amazing. I love that guy." So Greg really is Superman because Greg's 25 and really has his stuff together. We're going to talk later about Greg's ability to prioritize and plan his day. And Greg actually is going to start teaching people how to do that too, because Greg does it better than anybody. But the point of today's call really is, as always, it's being a real estate investor in New York. And Greg and I are probably maybe the only two people I know who have do deals significantly in a lot of deals in New York, but also do deals in other states and have chosen to remain in New York. Most people who go to other states say, because of the advantages, differences in the way business is done in other states, they say they're going to stay in the other states. But today we're going to talk about some of the reasons why we like New York and why we've chosen to stay in New York. So, Greg, why don't you talk a little bit about what you do and where you do it and how you do it?
Yeah, so I appreciate the introduction, man. I know there's some days where I'm, entrepreneuring, and I certainly don't feel like Superman because there's those ups and downs. But the consistency is where you win long term. So, yeah, I got started. I was in college. I went to a seminar, and they made it seem super easy, especially wholesaling. And I think that I'm not knocking the education company, but they were very generic and they were not specific on my market, which is the tri-state area of New York, which is, my primary market now. And I used to live there. I moved to San Diego a couple of years ago. So everything that was told to me, Michael, was not the reality in New York because title companies didn't exist. Sellers were way more unreasonable because it's expensive to live here. And I really had a tough time, man. I was going out there and taking action. I wasn't scared to, fall flat on my face, but I was starting to see the reality of New York and the perception of what the business is like nationwide. There was a delta there, and I was getting very frustrated with what was going on, because I was like they're saying you got to get this thing under contract in the kitchen, and I have all these attorneys telling me you can't assign. And I was so poor. I mean, I was so broke. I had no money in the bank. I mean, I was living with my parents, so it's like I was like homeless or anything. But like I was like super like stressed out, and I was like, oh my God, like I want to get rich and I want to be in real estate and I want to be successful. And there's just such a big barrier and there was so much resistance. And man, there were like, oh my God, there was probably like a year of just like pure struggle, like barely any income. I was going to garage sales and flipping stuff. And, you know, this is all like, you know, kind of part of my journey. But eventually I started, you know, getting some deals here and there from bandit signs in New York. And I established a relationship with some guys who are our mutual friends now, Dave Brown and then SDF Capital, Larry and Frank. And we all do business together, which is hilarious now. But they were like my early mentors, and I kind of worked for them for a little bit, like learned the ins and outs of the business. And then I started, you know, I've always been an entrepreneur. I can't work for someone else, just not my thing. And I started wholesaling them properties and JVing with them. And then I hit a big, like a $15,000 deal back when I was like 21. And that was the most money I've ever seen in my life. I had to work my tail off to get that thing. And, you know, from there, eventually started doing a few more deals in New York. And then it's funny, you know, because I started to make it happen a little bit in New York, but it was still very difficult. So after a couple of years, I was like, let me just see if this is easier in another market. So I literally kind of out of the whim picked Dallas, Texas, because there's a lot of people down there. It's a very popular area. And there was a lot of just vacant properties down there. There's a lot more people down there. So I figured, let me try this in Dallas, see if it's easier. And man, this is before skip tracing was even a thing. I was cleaning up in Dallas, like, you know, 3, 4, 5 properties a month, all virtual. We're making like serious, like $30,000, $40,000 spreads on these things. Like sometimes they were just wholesale spreads. And I was like, oh my God, this is like so much easier. There's no attorneys and blah, blah. So it was definitely easier. But then as that marketing started to change and people started to kind of get back into that market and do what I was doing, which wasn't popular at the time, which was cold calling, I realized that wasn't a sustainable business. And I knew that if I took what I now know and apply that into New York with a lot of business, I had some capital then, a decent amount of capital from those deals, and started doing this in my old area, I could make some serious profits in New York because I know the area better than most people. I had money then from doing all those deals in Texas. And I started going back into New York completely virtually and doing rehabs and doing wholesaling. And I mean, the spreads you can make in New York are just insane if you get a good deal. I mean, so we've had 6-figure deals. We've had humongous wholesales. We've had wholesale deals that were home runs. And we've also had some terrible deals. So I'm not, you know, it's not all sunshine and rainbows. But now, you know, I'm back in New York, you know, doing deals remotely. And I'm still doing stuff now in San Diego as well. So that's kind of the Cliff Notes version.
Okay, that's good. So I think there are a lot of reasons why, and I go through this in my course for people that ask about why it's harder in New York. But what we discussed earlier today is some of the reasons why it's better in New York. So what do you think some of the reasons why it's better, better to do in New York, and why you chose to still do deals in New York when you're living in California and doing deals in all over the country?
Yeah, so people always say, like, why are you still doing deals in New York? And I really say there's a couple reasons, and you make these points a lot in your course and in some of your other stuff. Even though that market is difficult because of attorneys and like the sellers, there really are less investors, believe it or not, competing in New York. Less investors than you think, because there's so much resistance. It scares off a lot of these huge guys who are doing like 70 deals a month, because they could not do that in New York. I'd bet a serious amount of money that like someone could probably not logistically do like 40 plus houses a month in New York, especially in our area, like the lower section of New York, just because of the logistics. So there's less investors. And so that's number one. It's not as your marketing goes a little bit farther, just because you're not going to be competing with 20 other investors usually. I mean, there's other investors, don't get me wrong, but it's not like Texas where me and Jason, the guy I do deals with down there, we've bid up against like 10 investors sometimes, and it's like at that point you're the auction. So that's number one, less competition. And the other thing I like about New York is that when you get into contract, because it's so hard to get into contract, you really are in so much control because you have attorneys representing you. You really can't get screwed out of a deal by another investor when you're in contract, which makes your negotiating position a lot better. And so that's the second reason. And then the third reason is the profits in that area are tremendous. If you can, if you can take the deals down, like you can make big wholesale fees too. We've made humongous wholesale fees, but if you have the ability to close, or if you know somebody who can close, you don't have to have the money yourself. The spreads you can make in the area that we live in are tremendous because of the values, right? And because they're, like you always say this, and I watch all your videos, by the way. I'm like a how Justin Bieber has his believers. I'm like a Pinter believer. I'm like a loyal. And I mean that, man. I mean that. And the spreads are big there, and you can you don't have to do a lot of volume to make a lot of money. So it just makes a lot of sense. If you know the area and you're willing to take on some of the BS, it's a great market. It's a great market, and there's just a lot of opportunity. And I think that it's an area where, because even in San Diego, I do stuff out here now, and it's different in California. There's a lot of investors, and it's expensive. New York's a little different, less investors, but it's.
Yeah, I think those are probably three of the main reasons why New York is better also. People are shocked when I tell them that there's not a lot of competition in New York, like they don't believe it. And I think there are a lot of people doing it, but there aren't a lot of people doing it in any kind of systematic way. Guys do usually 1 or 2 deals a year, that kind of thing. And I mean, we know members of our mastermind Investor Fuel, or the members of Collective Genius, and all the people in New York you can count on one hand. And you talk about a place like Oklahoma City, which has 600,000 people in it. It's like 20 members of those masterminds. There's, Birmingham, Alabama's got a dozen. So Phoenix and Dallas have 20 and 30. So there's a lot less people doing it. People don't understand that that's a big, big deal. That we have less competition. And making more money for sure.
Yeah, there's the less competition and the money thing, the spreads, and that's a big. You said this because of that barrier to entry. It's just different. It scares off these investors who want the low-hanging fruit, because they're like, oh, I don't want to have to deal with an attorney, and then I got to get an attorney, and I got to put a big deposit down, and all this and all that. Like, that's something you talk about that, you're not putting $10 deposits down in our area. That's just not happening. I found a way to be in between 500 and 1,000 now, and if it's a really good deal, I'll put like 2 down. But you're not putting down $10 deposits. You're not. You're not. Doing a deal with no, it's just a different animal, and you should look at that as a benefit, because, like, what would you say, Michael? How many times have you gone into contract in Long Island, which is a little more different than upstate? You're not going to get, like, you can't get snaked by another investor, because you're so strong in that contract. Have you ever gotten in a situation where you got kicked out of a contract, or the seller tried to screw you, but you couldn't?
No, never. They can't. They can't. I had a deal once with $120,000 wholesale deal, and I was very, very concerned, because the seller was a very militant guy who was really like a victim. I'm getting screwed, and I told my attorney, I'm afraid when we get to this closing, this guy's going to want to walk away, because he's going to see $120,000 wholesale fee. And my attorney said, listen, he might be pissed off, but he's got to close. He's got no options. He can't get out. You can sue him for the whole thing. That's just how it works. It's not like that in a lot of states. Nobody's suing anybody for specific performance in other states. But here, you could sue somebody for the whole amount of the purchase. That deal closed. We made $120,000 on it. Right?
Yeah, no, that's the benefit. And see, that's why I love how you start with the differences of New York and then the benefits. Because the benefits are what makes it worth it here. You gotta, if you're a new investor and you're in the tri-state area, like, number one, you got Michael Pinter, the only one I know who's really actively teaching this in the New York area. Because if you take your information from a lot of the, like, there's a lot, we have a lot of mutual friends, we're pretty well connected in our business, in our industry. But you have to, if you're in this area, you need to follow people who are only doing deals in New York. And you can take people's advice nationwide if it's more of a marketing approach, or maybe you're dealing with something that's not general, something that's more general. But when it comes to the specific logistics of a deal, you have to listen to people who are doing it in your market. I get people reach out through my website all the time, my seller website, and they're newbies in my area. And I give them some time on the phone, because that's how, Dave Brown and Larry and Frank were when I started. And, I tell them some things, and they're a little like, oh my God, I didn't know that. I'm like, dude, that's the reality in this area, man. Like, if you don't have a reasonable deposit to put down, like, you're going to have to team up with a guy like me or another investor, because, we're here to help you, but this is not like what Guru from Oklahoma says, or Guru from Washington State says. It's a different animal. And if you have those expectations going in, not if, but when they happen, right? When these barriers come up because of our market, you're not going to be disappointed like I was because I had the wrong expectations going in. And that's a big thing that you like to teach, Michael. That is awesome.
Right. And I think like up to the point where the seller says yes, it's probably the same kind of process as in other states. But once that seller says yes, everything changes. And I get called at least once a week, sometimes 10 times a week, with the same. I get the same three questions all the time. One is, do I know an investor-friendly title company? The second is, what contract do I use with a seller? And what's the
Yeah.
third one that I get a lot? I get something along. How long of an inspection period do I put on my contract? So like I have to. So I know when I get those questions, those are people that went online and they got good information from good people. You know, there's a lot of great people out there. Maxwell's great. All these guys. There's so many great people on the internet teaching how to do this. But what they teach, Brett Daniels, what they teach just doesn't apply once the seller says yes. So I got to go through the whole process and explain to them, listen, those things don't apply in New York. The inspection gets done before the contract in New York. The title company doesn't run the transaction, an attorney does. And you can't use your own contract, the seller's attorney prepares it. Those are things I constantly explain to people. I'm sure you get the same questions.
That's the key. And I like let's kind of dive deep on this here because I just went through this on a huge deal I'm doing right now in New York, actually in my hometown where I'm from, in Monroe. So there's a deal. It was a referral that came through, and like Chris Voss always says this in negotiation, and we can maybe get into some sales tips too, for sure, for people in New York, because that's a whole nother animal. The guy's like, yes, let's do the deal. So long story short, the guy's like, let's do the deal. I said, okay, cool. The next step is going to be getting the attorneys involved, getting the agreements out. See, I don't like to call them contracts. I like to call them agreements until they're signed because contracts sometimes scares people. So once the agreements are out, you see it, make sure it works for you. I'll see it and make sure it works for me. And then if we're all happy and well, I'll give you the deposit. I'll give your attorney the deposit and we'll sign it. So the point between this is like this is a tactical tip for people in New York. When you get a yes on the telephone or in person, depending on where you are, what you're doing, whenever you're watching this, you need to spend 80% of your time focusing on the 20% of things that matter, which is getting the deal locked up. So you need to be on your attorney, you need to be on your seller, and you need to get up every single day saying, what's the next step to get this thing in contract? Who do I need to call? Who do I need to email? What are we waiting on? Is it their attorney? Is it my attorney? Are they cool with the contract? Because there's this weird no man's land in our area where sometimes, not all the time, I've gotten really good at trying to prevent this, but you get the yes on the phone and the attorney jacks up the file and all of a sudden that $80,000 deal dies because the attorney kills the deal or there's too much time in between and the seller got cold feet. Man, I had a house I was going to make 100 G's on last year, and the attorney got the deal and told the seller he was selling for too little, and he put it on the MLS and he sold it for $100,000 more than what I was getting it for. And the guy was happy as a clam with my offer. And I was super upfront with him. I told him to list it, and he's like, I don't want to list it. And I would have made $100,000 on the house. Well, probably like 80 after closing costs. But still, that is a reality in New York. And you have to anticipate that. It's just the cost of doing business sometimes. But you need to spend time getting the sellers, especially in our market, Michael, where a lot of these sellers, they've never done this before. They've never dealt with an attorney. They're very nervous about what's going on. Our business, unfortunately, raises a lot of people get skeptical because anything, if it seems too good to be true, sometimes it is. In our business, unfortunately, it is not too good to be true. We actually do what we say we're going to do, but they've never done this before. They've never used an attorney. They're scared about the price. They like the price of the attorney. So you have to really take those barriers down and stay on that case until that thing gets signed. Because once you're in contract, like you said, you're not going anywhere. They're not going anywhere. You're in there until you close. So, I mean, that's a big. What do you do, Michael, when you get a deal locked up? Don't you stay on that thing like a hawk, right? Until it's
for sure.
Until it's with you.
One of the things I do after the seller said yes, I try and plant these 3 seeds that I talk about more in the course. But there's 3 things that I think you need to talk to the seller about if you're wholesaling, right? If you're taking the property down, these things are less important. But the 3 things that I always try to plant are A, that the contracts to be assignable, because standard contracts in New York are not assignable. B, size of the deposit, right? I try and tell them, standard in New York is 10%, but I want, how much I want to give them. And also that I
Yeah.
want to show the property. So I'm trying to wholesale it. I want to almost get that into the addendum that I can show the property a few times. So those have to be presented to the seller, I think, before he talks to his attorney for the first time, and in a way where they're going to benefit him. So those are the kind of things that I do. Now, once it's locked up, so you talk about no man's land. I have deals. Looking now, I have 5 deals where the seller said yes, the offer was accepted, and I'm still not in contract. There's always things in that no man's land. You try to get them out as hard as you can, but sometimes it's just a paralegal that from one side that's waiting that hasn't responded to an email from somebody else. But once it's locked up, then it really depends on how you close it. If you're going to close on it, then you want to get your financing in order. But if you're going to wholesale it, then you really got to get to showing it, getting it out to the buyers list, and figuring out if this is something that you see how much money you're going to make.
Yeah. For sure. That's key there with setting the expectations. Because I've found it, Michael, always, at least for me, I'm probably doing it wrong. I've always found it a lot, depending on the property, it's always been a little tougher for me to wholesale some properties mostly because of the showings. So we've had properties where, the deposit wasn't that big of an issue. We've had a couple where we had to really fight them. Not fight them, but be like, listen, we can't put $10,000 down. It's feasible, yeah. So we get it down. But the showing of the property is where I run into some resistance. So I try to, obviously, if it's vacant, great, and then we get a lockbox on there or they hide the key. But if, like you said, if you want to wholesale a property and someone's living in there, you need to set those expectations up. I actually just did this with a property I'm wholesaling, trying to wholesale in Port Jervis. But you got, hey, listen, I'm going to have my contractor, I'm going to have my partner, so I just use this, I'm going to have my construction partner come in and take a look at this thing. He's going to just make sure that, the budget is what we think it's going to be. It's going to take 10 minutes, and they're going to be in and out of there, and there's no sweat. And when you can frame it like that, because that is the case sometimes. I got my contractor going in there if I'm going to rehab it or if I might rehab it. But if you set that stage in advance, they're not going to be too upset. Or if they are upset, they're going to say, oh, that's a problem. Well, then you can figure out how to deal with it. Can you just take it down? But setting the stage with those sellers is so important, especially in New York, because then they have their attorney, and the attorney gets mad. And usually what I've seen, Michael, is if the seller is on board with whatever they're trying to do, most of the time their attorney is on board. But if they didn't know what was supposed to happen, then the attorney becomes a little bit of a pain in the ass, especially down in Westchester County. They can really, no offense to the attorneys in Westchester County, but you guys are really with, and if you make my life easier, I'll buy you donuts. Because sometimes
no difference in Long Island. I think it's the same kind of thing. Both New York City suburbs.
Rockland County too. No offense to those Rockland attorneys. They're like, oh man, but anyway, the point is you got to set the stage, and that's big. So Michael, how often? Let me ask you this question. I'm going to flip the interview here. Let's say out of a sample size of 10 deals you get in your area, Long Island is like I said, it's more aggressive down there. Orange County, New York's a little less aggressive, a little more upstate. But out of 10 deals, how many do you have a difficult time wholesaling because of the logistics of the seller's situation, not because of the financials of the deal? With
Maybe
the buyer,
I said 1 or 2 out of 10. I just had a deal where I was sure I was going to wholesale it and make money. The seller would not give me access, so I had to close on it. And I'm almost done with the rehab now. It happens on occasion, but it's really more me than it is the deal. It's if I plant those seeds before they speak to their attorney, and I talk to them about showing it, then usually I can get it in a contract and an addendum, and then they're legally obligated to let me show it at that point. So it's less of a problem. I'll say to them, not even that I have to get just my contractor in there. I'll say to them, I want to get potential buyers in there. I'm going to say to them, listen, I want to get people in there to see how much work I'm going to do. I want to know, I know people in the area who are looking to buy, and I want to know if that, depending on the situation. So I recently did one had a huge bedroom. I'm like, I got to know whether I want to divide that up into 2 bedrooms or had small bedrooms. I said, I want to know if I want to break that into 1 big bedroom. And then I think they understand that, and they go, okay. So when I get people coming in who are cash buyers most of the time, they're not saying, hey, these aren't all contractors. They understand, because I told them I want to bring in potential buyers, and I tell them, listen, I want to start doing work the day we close, so I got to bring in people beforehand. You got to let me do that.
That's key. You just hit it right on the head. I want to start doing work the day we close, and in order to do that, in order to get you your money as soon as possible, Mr. Seller, because like you said, you always wanted to benefit them. I need to bring a couple people in. It's not going to be a realtor showing. There's no open house signs here. I just got to get my guys in here. They're going to do what they got to do, and we'll be out of your hair in 20 minutes or whatever. And that's the key. And the thing is, like you said this earlier, I want to drill in on it because I want to expand it because it's important. You got to always make it benefit the seller. Hey, so we can get you your money as soon as possible because I know that's important to you. I'm going to bring my guys in now so we can get the budget straightened away so we can close on the day that we agreed upon, right? And like it's benefiting them, and they're open to it. And that's key, Mike. That is key. And here's another thing that I've noticed in New York as I've grown as an investor over the last 5 years. Because when I got started, it was definitely difficult. Like I had a tough time. I definitely had some deals that I dropped because I didn't know what I was doing. But once I had the ability to close, whether that was me, and it wasn't me at first, right? I didn't have the money at first. It was guys that I knew who had the money. Once I had the backing, whether it was my finance, my resources, or my buddy's resources, or then I was able to really get even better deals because I knew no matter what, I wasn't relying on an end buyer to buy that. I was going to close no matter what. And that in turn got me bigger wholesale fees if I wholesaled, or allowed me to make triple the money on a deal when I'm rehabbing it instead of just wholesaling it. Because like I have properties where I can make 30, 40 assigning it. And that's good. Like in New York, that's the only area besides San Diego where I live where you can really do that consistently. But if you have to look at the deal, like I was speaking with Jason Boozy, my buddy, about this. He's up in the Bay Area. You have to look at yourself as an investor from day one. If you just only look at yourself as a wholesaler, maybe because of your financial position, you're leaving so much money on the table because that's what I did, and that's what a lot of people do, and they make that mistake. If you say, I'm an investor, I'm a problem solver, I invest in properties, and depending on what makes the most financial sense, I'm going to figure out what I'm going to do with that property. And even if the deal is unaffordable for me, I know someone in my network who will do the deal with me and we'll split it or whatever. And it will allow you to make more money out of the leads that you're getting. Because if you get leads coming in, especially in New York, where it's tougher to lock them up, and you just can only wholesale the property, you limit yourself. And when you have the ability to close, you can make more money wholesaling, and you can take the deals down. And we can get into a case study if you want where I did this and like kind of walk through the logistics. You're going to be able to just be more successful quicker because I learned the hard way. It took me years to figure this out, right? So now, obviously, I don't do that anymore, but it took me a couple of years. So yeah, I mean, what would you say about that advice, Mike? Because I wish I told myself this when I got started. Because
listen, when you first started, you didn't have the ability because you didn't know what you were doing. You didn't have the money to do it. But what you said, the ability to close is a big difference. First of all, you can sleep at night, right? If you're a wholesaler and you get into contract, and there's no outs in New York like in other places where I'm just going to put an inspection contingency. You're not going to sleep at night if everybody you want to sell to is telling you they'll pay you less than what you paid for it.
Oh, yeah. And it's still a deal because you control on it. Yeah.
Right. So you don't have any way out. So it's hard to sleep at night. So for you and me, when we know we can close on a deal, it changes everything. It changes, and like you said, you make more money wholesaling because I literally tell people, listen, I'll close on it myself if you're not going to tell me. And that's it. And it's the truth.
Yeah.
So it's definitely true. The ability to close is a big deal, and it separates you from a lot of these guys that are, who just watched a course from Tom Kroll and now are saying they go to the guy and say, I'm going to just try and middle their way into something. So absolutely, I think that's a big deal. But if you want to talk about that case study, if you could bring up that case study where you said when you closed and paid more money, I'd love to hear it.
We'll bring that up. Before we bring that up, I just want to hit one more point that you always talk about that people need to understand if they're going to get involved, whether they're wholesaling the property or whether they're taking it down. This is a big deal in New York that people don't talk about. And I'm going to set the stage with a story. I bought a property in Dallas a couple of years ago with my buddy, and we made actually, we didn't even make a pile of money on this. This one, it was like a base hit deal. We rehabbed it. But, the bureaucratic system or the towns down in Texas or whatever the heck they're called, it's another world down there. We literally bought a property, and I think it was a 2-bed house. And the way that we made it a 3-bed house, Michael, was we put a stinking door in the hinge and called it a door. And it was a 3-bed house. So down there, you can do anything. You try to do that in New York, you're going to be hosed. So you have to know the villages and the municipalities, especially in our area, Michael, are very finicky to deal with. And you need to know what the deal is going to be, whether you're wholesaling that to the buyer or whether you're doing it yourself. Can you just elaborate on that real quick, Michael? Because in my story, I'm going to talk about this, but
Sure.
this is something that gurus don't talk about.
Yeah, it's very complicated in my area. So Nassau and Suffolk County, there are so many townships and villages within the townships. You need to even know which, or sometimes even know which who has jurisdiction in the area. Like we do a lot in Floral Park. Floral Park has a village of Floral Park. Floral Park has a section of Floral Park that's the town of Hempstead. Floral Park has a section of Floral Park that's the town of North Hempstead. And literally across the street from each other. Oh, Floral Park also has Queens. So there's 4 different municipalities in the city of New York. So there's 4 different municipalities in Floral Park. So dealing with these municipalities is not easy. You got to know some of them are much harder than others. There are some villages here where literally, they're on top of you. The second you bring a guy in there to give you a quote, the inspector's looking at him and saying, "What's he doing there?" And some are not as difficult. I remember, we do a bunch of Village of Hempstead. Village of Hempstead is impossible. We got fines. I had to go to court like 7 times over something stupid, like the guy left the refrigerator outside and the door wasn't taken off. Apparently that's some violation because some kid can climb in and get suffocated. I didn't know. But if you want to just fine me, I'll pay it. But I had to show up in court and plead guilty to a lesser offense. It was a crazy thing. So dealing with municipalities in New York is very difficult. Texas is, I'm sure, a lot easier. I'm sure most of the country is a lot easier than the areas we deal with. But you have to deal with a couple of towns up there.
Oh, New York. The New York and California is terrible too. There's something I was looking at, a development deal out here, and like the developer I was talking to was like, I never deal with the city of Delmar again, because the New York area, you need to know this going in, because if you have a property with violations, for example, it's still probably a deal, but you need to know whether you're selling that to a buyer or whether you're taking it down yourself. How do I deal with these violations in a reasonable way? What do I need to do to solve this problem? Because I've had deals that I've made tons of money on, but we had these violations.
You want to talk about your porch property?
That's part of the case today. That's why I wanted to set the stage with this. So to wrap up this little interview here, Michael, I appreciate you inviting me on here. So here's a case study. So, what I was doing in Texas was I was basically just looking for vacant houses and calling them. This is before skiptracing was popular. This was like a couple of years ago. No one was really doing this. And it was like, no, it was a blue ocean. That blue ocean strategy. It was a blue ocean. There was no competition. It was honestly, it almost seemed too good to be true. So I started doing this in New York. And, there's still tons of opportunity to do that. But anyway, long story short, I run into a deal in Nanuet, which is in Rockland County, which is a phenomenal area. I mean, this property was the worst house in the best neighborhood, like school district and right by the Palisades Parkway, like this thing right by the Thruway, right by New Jersey, 25 minutes, a stone's throw away from Manhattan. I go to the property. I meet the guy there. I happened to be in New York. I flew back for this thing. And, I got the thing at a smoking price. The guy was not even that distressed. He was very reasonable. He just didn't want to mess with his property. And I was like, I could have wholesaled it for like 70 grand all day long. I'm like, no way, I'm buying this thing. So I borrow Lending Home Hard Money, which is a pretty good company, but closing costs in New York are ridiculous. So yeah. I probably like 30, 40 grand of my own personal money on this. And long story short, I do like, it was intending to be a wholesale, but always turned into a rehab, which is fine. Nowadays, I don't even get upset. I just accept the fact that they're rehabs. So I get this thing turned around. And here's the deal. When I bought the property, the way that this bureaucratic stinking town of Orangetown worked is they did not send anybody out to the property to see if there were any violations. They did an internal search. And at the time, they didn't know that there was an illegal deck, so they told me I had no active violations. You're good to close. I take the property down. I own it for a couple of weeks. I rehab it. I put it on the market. And I get a buyer literally in 2 days to pay, I think, a little bit more than my asking price. So it was like $5K over asking price, and they were a traditional loan. And we're clear to close. I'm in the net 6 figures on this thing. I still ended up making that. There's a huge issue that comes up, and they said, oh, well, we didn't know about this deck that was on the property. And I said, what are you talking about? Like, when you gave me the municipal report back when I closed, and they're like, well, yeah, we didn't send anyone out to the property. I said, well, what has changed since then? And they said, oh, well, now we send somebody out, and they do an external inspection, and they see if there's any monkey business. And meanwhile, I could have gotten hammered on this thing because I was doing construction in that house for like 4 weeks. So like there was we're taking stuff out of the basement. We're freaking got hammers and doing a rehab. So they didn't even know what was going on inside. So anyway, so they and that's a little thing you gotta in New York you gotta really know the area. So I ended up having to fly back to New York for a month on a one-way ticket, and I was really pissed off about that. I was like, what the hell? It's expensive. And I had to go through the entire building process with permits and architects. It cost me a fortune. I had to hire another contractor besides my main guy. He ripped me off. I knew he ripped me off. I had no choice. I was like begging this guy. I was like going to the property twice a day in my like $100 a day rental car because I was still 24, so I had the young driver fee. That trip cost me a fortune. Anyway, long story short, I get this thing fixed. We closed. I made over $100,000 on that thing. But it got me to realize, number one, New York, you can make these big spreads. And number two, you need to know going into deals that problems are going to come up, especially if you're dealing with rehabs. And you need to do what it takes to solve those problems, because they are going to happen whether you're wholesaling or whether you're rehabbing. And if you put your problem-solving hat on and get very clear on what you want, which my goal was to make $100,000 plus on a property, and I was willing to do whatever it takes to get it, fly to New York for a month and spend $10,000, you're going to get it eventually. You've got to persist through those obstacles. And that was a life-changing deal, Michael, because it really opened my eyes up to like, wow, like you can make big spreads. And, I've never made a big before.
Let me ask you something. Knowing what you know now, you have taken the $70,000 wholesale.
No. Nope.
Because
I wouldn't have. Because I learned. It's the learning. Right. Yeah.
The education.
I'll tell you what. I honestly, Michael, I probably, if I really wanted to, I probably could have wholesaled that for 6 years, knowing what I know now. But it was such a hot deal. I said, I don't want a buyer or something to get hairy to kill this thing, because like I literally set a goal. Like, I want to net $100,000 on a property by like a certain date, and I was like a month later or whatever. But because of that, I didn't want to wholesale it. But knowing what I know now, like in 2020, that was even a year ago, I could have probably found a buyer to take that off my hands for, what was it, $280.
I think I lost you. Hello? You're frozen, Greg. I don't know if you can see me. I think we lost Greg, if this is still live. I don't know if you can. But I can't.
All right. Yeah, well, Greg is a superstar. I love Greg. Greg has a podcast that I've listened to every single episode. I was interviewed on one of them, Pave the Way. And then Greg has some time management stuff that he has on a website called pavetheday.com with a D. And Greg is probably the best person at time management that I know. Apparently, internet management and Wi-Fi management is not his forte, because I think we lost him. But Greg is really a superstar. You should look at his stuff. Pave the Way podcast and Pave the Day for his time management. If anybody's interested in learning more, oh, Greg's back. Let me invite him.
Hey, I got a telephone call from one of my bankers. Yeah, they booted me off. I couldn't leave like that, man. I couldn't leave like that. I heard you talking about Pave the Day, but yeah, but I had to like hit.
Back to that deal. You saying you could have sold it retail for someone and made $100,000? You think?
No, I could have. Knowing what I know now, I could have probably wholesaled it to somebody for 6 figures, but I didn't even want to take the chance last year because I wanted to. I knew that the best chance of hitting the 6-figure spread was to rehab it. But I mean, yeah, so it would have been an easy $70,000 deal. But I'm like, for some reason in my mind, I'm like, I need to net 6 figures on a deal. That's, and I'll tell you, what was, Mike? I want you to, if you don't mind sharing, that property you did where you made like $170. I think it was $170. You made the craziest wholesale.
185.
Going down. Yeah. Because this is, I want to inspire the listeners, because you could.
It was an estate sale where the guy owned a portfolio of houses. and he wanted to get out, and we got in for 750, and we found a buyer for 975.
Oh,
That's 225, and the guy was going to take the assignment on all 5 of them, but there were 2 other properties that were complicated, so we wanted to close because if they saw us signing, it could have been an issue. So we just we double closed. So we spent $45,000 in closing costs to double close, but we still made $185,000 on that one deal. That was the best deal that I ever did.
yeah.
That's awesome.
Possible. I mean, see, and that's the thing. Like, Michael and I are sharing these stories not to pound on our chests and say that we're the best deal makers ever, because we got lots to learn. But you can, if you consistently take action, you can do these deals. I mean, this is not like, it's not abnormal to do deals like that every couple months if you're marketing consistently and you're getting the opportunity to make offers, which is essentially that's the whole business. Is you're getting the opportunity to make offers.
Absolutely. And it's funny because I find I can take action for a long time and not get any results from those actions right away, but then eventually, like, things happen. Like, I've been spending some time buying properties, looking at properties on online auctions lately, and I was about to like give up, and I just got a contract yesterday. I'm buying for $400,000 for $200,000. I mean, online.
Are you going to wholesale that or what?
It's hard to wholesale when, I mean, look at the contract that they sent me. Look how many pages it is. Look at 1,000 pages. And it says you can't assign it, but I'm buying it in an LLC, so maybe I'll sell the LLC. I don't know. But it's hard. It's hard when you do those bank-owned auction properties.
Did you get that on Zone? Where'd you get that? Zone, or did you go live auction court steps?
This was Hubzu.
That's crazy that see, I've never messed with the bank auctions in New York because there's always been a gazillion people bidding on it. And I'm like, screw it, I'm just going to mark it.
So it's a weird situation. This house, it's always, whenever you win, it's like a weird situation. So this house it's in a village where they thought we're going to make you lift it. And I finally spoke to like the head of the building department. He's like, we're not going to make you lift it. So I'm like, okay, we're not going to lift it then. I'm going to buy it because it's super cheap.
Nice.
I think most people are afraid. The house has been vacant since Sandy, 2012.
Oh man, is it a coastal city? Where is this thing in, like, Long Beach?
Freeport.
Oh, it's in Freeport. Okay, yeah.
Right near the water. Not on the water, but near the water.
Yeah. Do you have to get flood insurance on that thing or what?
Well, hopefully I won't, but somebody will.
Yeah. That's interesting. Keep me posted on that. But I hope the people watching this they get inspired to. If you're new starting out, or if you're in the business for a little bit and you're not getting traction, and you're primarily in the New York area, you have to have the right expectations. You got to go in there with your eyes open. You got to watch Michael's stuff as much as you can. Because I'm telling you, the guys and girls here, I'm a quote unquote experienced investor. I watch every single one of Michael's videos. Like, he's one of my best buds. We're texts all the time. I literally watch his videos every day when I'm doing my stretching routine at night. I watch his videos because I learn from him. You guys got to stay engaged and got to plug into his stuff, because I wish he was around doing this stuff when I got started, because it would have saved me a lot of time, because I was looking for someone. I remember I would go on the internet, Michael, and I'm like, who's doing this in New York? Like, this one guy was in New York, but he was just a guru, and I'm like, what is going on? Like, I could not imagine somebody doing it in New York. It was like a fantasy, until I met Larry and Frank, and I'm like, how are you guys doing this in New York? So it's possible. So it was awesome to join you, Michael. And I mean, I encourage everyone to just go out there. You got to take action. You got to be persistent. And, if you guys have properties, like, hit up Michael. He's doing this. He'll help you. Like, you're not alone. You got tons of experienced investors out there. You got to be resourceful. And, if you stick with it long enough, the business will change your life, allow you to have freedom and not have to worry about money and all that stuff. It's like, you got to be persistent. But if you're persistent, eventually you'll get to a situation where you can kind of live life on your terms, which is cool.
Thank you, Greg. I really appreciate it. You are my first guest, and I couldn't have asked for a better one. So thank you very much.
It's an honor to serve your listeners, man. I'm looking forward to watching this myself and sharing it with my followers.
Thank you very much, Greg. All right, have a great day.
See ya.
Bye-bye.